Dear listeners, I welcome you to my channel. Leave your comments and impressions, I value your opinion. The sterile white of the hospital corridor never felt colder as I stalked through it, my scrubs swishing quietly with each step. Working as an ER nurse meant long, grueling shifts, but the satisfaction of saving lives always gave me a sense of purpose. Little did I know, the life I was about to save tonight would be my own in a way I never expected. As I approached the locker room at the end of my shift, my phone vibrated with a message from an unknown number. The preview showed a photo, and I froze, my heart sinking. It was a picture of my own bedroom, but this was not how I left it this morning. My hands trembled as I opened the message to find a series of photos and a video. The images depicted my wife, Lara, and a man I had never seen before, entangled in our sheets. The timestamp, just hours ago. I felt a mix of nausea and rage churn in my stomach. The last photo was the worst. A close-up of her hand, with her wedding ring glaringly visible intertwined with his. I leaned against the cold metal lockers, my breaths short and sharp. How could she? I muttered under my breath, the words tasting bitter. Suddenly, the locker room door swung open. It was Mike, a fellow nurse and my closest friend at the hospital. "Hey Jake, you okay, man? You look like you've seen a ghost," Mike said, his brow furrowing in concern. I shoved the phone towards him, my hands still shaking. "Look at this," I said, my voice a mix of anger and disbelief. Mike's eyes widened as he scrolled through the messages. "Jake, I don't even know what to say. I have to confront her. I have to know why," I said, my decision firm. I knew I couldn't let this fester, it was eating me alive already. "Are you sure you want to do this now? It's been a long shift, and you're exhausted," Mike cautioned, handing back the phone. "No, it has to be now. I need to see her face when I ask her about it." With that, I changed out of my scrubs, my movements robotic. Each step towards my car felt like wading through quicksand, but my resolve was solid. I was going to face her tonight. The drive home was a blur, the city lights streaking past as my mind raced. She wanted to take everything from me, I thought bitterly. The home we built together, the life we promised each other, everything was a lie. As I pulled into the driveway, I saw that the lights were on. "She's home," I whispered to myself. My grip tightened on the steering wheel, preparing for the confrontation. I entered the house quietly. The familiar sound of our wedding song playing softly from the living room was like a cruel joke. There on the sofa sat Lara, a glass of wine in her hand, looking serene. "Lara," I called out, my voice steady despite the storm inside. She turned, her smile fading as she saw my expression. "Jake, what's wrong?" I held up my phone, the photos displayed on the screen. "You tell me what's wrong." Her face went pale, and the glass slipped from her hand, shattering against the hardwood floor. "Jake, I can explain," she stammered, rising to her feet. "I trusted you, Lara. I loved you. And this is what I come home to." My voice broke, the hurt evident. "Please let me explain." "It's not what it looks like," she pleaded, her eyes filling with tears. "You brought him into our home, into our bed. How is it not what it looks like?" I demanded, my fury mounting. She fell to her knees, sobbing. "I made a mistake. Please, Jake, I'm so sorry." Looking down at her, the woman I thought I knew, all I felt was the cold emptiness where love once lived. "Save it for the lawyers," I said, turning away. I had seen enough. Tonight was just the beginning. The battle lines were drawn, and I was ready to fight back. And so the stage was set for a battle that would shake the very foundations of our lives. Morning light filtered through the blinds, casting long shadows across the kitchen where I sat with my head in my hands. The events of last night replayed in my mind like a nightmare I couldn't wake from. The image of Lara, tearful and begging, was seared into my memory, but my heart was hard. Betrayal has a way of freezing the warmest feelings. My phone rang, slicing through the silence. It was my sister Ellie, who had always been more like a battle companion than a sibling. "Jake," Mike called me. He told me what happened. "Are you okay?" Her voice was laced with concern and a tinge of anger on my behalf. "No, Elle. I'm far from okay. But I'm going to handle this. I need to be smart about it." "You need a good lawyer, Jake. I know someone from my firm who specializes in family law. She's tough as nails." "Want me to set up a meeting?" "Yes, thanks. I want to make sure I'm protected, especially when it comes to the house and everything else we own." I'll take care of it. And Jake, I'm here for you, always, Ellie reassured me, her voice firm and comforting. I spent the next hour pacing the living room, planning my next steps. I needed more than just legal advice, I needed solid proof. The photos were damning, but I wanted everything airtight. My mind spun with possibilities as I prepared for the upcoming battle. The doorbell rang. Expecting Ellie, I opened the door to find my neighbor, Tom, standing on my porch, his brow creased with concern. Heard some of it from Mike, couldn't believe it. Anything I can do, man? Actually, yes, I said, realizing that Tom, a retired police detective, could be invaluable. I need to make sure I have all the evidence I need. Any advice? Tom nodded, stepping inside. First, make sure you keep copies of all communications with her, texts, emails, everything. And if you can get more on this guy she was with, do it. We sat down, and I pulled out my laptop, showing him the evidence I collected. Tom's eyes narrowed as he scrolled through. Looks like you've got a good start here. Let's see if we can find out more about this guy. A PI might help too. The conversation was interrupted by another ring at the door. This time, it was Ellie, accompanied by a stern-looking woman with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense bun. Jake. This is Vanessa Price. She's the best there is. Vanessa extended her hand, her grip firm. I understand you're going through a tough time. I'm here to make sure you come out of this on your feet. Let's talk strategy. We gathered around the dining table, a makeshift war room. Vanessa laid out the legal landscape, while Tom suggested surveillance tactics to strengthen the case. Ellie interjected with questions about Lara's financial maneuvers, something we hadn't considered deeply yet. As the meeting drew to a close, I felt a mix of relief and escalating tension. Armed with a plan and a team, I was ready to fight back. But in the back of my mind, I wondered about the cost of this war, not in dollars, but in peace and emotional well-being. The road ahead was clear, yet fraught with unseen perils. As everyone filed out, promising their support and readiness, I stood at the window, watching the world go about its business as if nothing had changed. But for me, everything had changed. Lara's betrayal had set in motion events that could not be undone. I was ready for battle, but at what cost? With the stage set for a legal showdown, my resolve hardened. I was determined to protect what was mine, but the shadows of doubt lingered, hinting at the personal costs of such a victory. The sun hadn't yet crested the horizon when I found myself in the office of a private investigator recommended by Tom. The office smelled of old books and coffee, a comforting scent that did little to ease the knots in my stomach. Across from me sat Hank Monroe, a PI with a reputation for discretion and efficiency. I've read through your brief, Hank said, his voice gravelly with years of smoking. We need to gather more on the guy she's involved with, find out if this was a one-time thing or part of a bigger pattern. Can you handle that discreetly? I asked, leaning forward. The last thing I needed was this blowing up before I had all my ducks in a row. Hank nodded, his eyes sharp. Discretion is my middle name. I'll start with the basics, see where he lives, works, and dig into his background. Anything specific you want beyond that. Find out if he knows about me, about us being married. I want to know if he was aware of what he was walking into, I said, my voice hardening. You got it. I'll get on it and keep you updated. After leaving Hank's office, I drove to the hospital, my mind racing. Today was my first shift back since everything unraveled. The hospital was a maze of sterile halls and busy staff, but it felt like a different world now. Mike caught up with me by the lockers, his face etched with concern. How are you holding up? He asked, clapping a hand on my shoulder. Just getting through the day, I replied, squeezing into my scrubs. The shift passed in a blur of patients and paperwork. My phone vibrated throughout the day with updates from Hank and messages from Vanessa, discussing strategies and next steps. By the time my shift ended, I had another meeting lined up with Vanessa and Ellie to discuss the new information. We convened at a quiet coffee shop, away from prying eyes. Ellie slid a folder across the table to me as soon as I sat down. This is what Vanessa has prepared based on your assets and what you've told her about Lara's spending habits. Vanessa tapped the folder. I've highlighted some inconsistencies in her financial activities over the past few months. Looks like she's been funneling money into a separate account. That could explain a lot, I murmured, flipping through the documents. Also, Hank has a lead, Ellie interjected. The guy named Darren apparently brags about conquering married women. It's sick. He's done this before. My jaw clenched. So he knew exactly what he was doing. Yes, and we can use that. It shows premeditation on his part and could help in proving Lara's involvement wasn't just a moment of weakness, Vanessa explained. As we strategized, my phone buzzed again. It was a text from Hank with a picture attached. The image showed Darren entering what looked like a high-end apartment complex. Got his address. More to follow, the text read. Looks like we're gathering a full arsenal, I said, feeling a mix of satisfaction and dread. Each piece of evidence was a double-edged sword, cutting both ways. We need to be ready for anything, Vanessa said firmly. It's not just about gathering evidence. It's about staying 2 steps ahead. As we wrapped up, I felt a strange sense of camaraderie with my small team. They were here, in the trenches with me, ready to fight a battle none of us wanted, but all were committed to seeing through. Driving home, the weight of the situation settled on my shoulders like a mantle. This was more than just a personal vendetta. It was a quest for truth, however ugly it might turn out to be. I knew the road ahead would be tough, filled with revelations I might not be ready to face. But I had to go down this path, not just for my peace of mind, but for the semblance of justice it promised. As the city lights blinked past, I steeled myself for what was to come. This was just the beginning, and I was ready for the storm. The courtroom was silent except for the soft murmur of voices as the final day of the trial commenced. The air was thick with anticipation. Sitting beside Vanessa, I felt a mix of nerves and resolve. Today would mark the end of the tumultuous journey that began with betrayal. As the proceedings started, Vanessa leaned over, whispering, "Ready for this to be over?" "More than anything," I replied, watching as Lara and her attorney took their positions. She hadn't looked my way since the trial began, and today was no exception. The morning was a blur of closing arguments and legal jargon, but as the afternoon approached, Vanessa gave me a nod. It was time for our final move. She rose, addressing the judge with a calm assertiveness. "Your Honor, we would like to call one final witness, Mr. Darren Michaels." A murmur rippled through the courtroom as Darren was brought in. His confident stride faltered as he caught sight of me. Under Vanessa's skillful questioning, Darren's facade began to crumble. He admitted to knowing Lara was married, to their meetings, and to the financial arrangements Lara had promised him. "And isn't it true that you were promised a substantial sum should Mr. Reed, my client, be convinced to leave the marriage without a fight?" Vanessa's question hung in the air like a guillotine. Darren hesitated, glancing nervously at Lara before nodding slowly. "Yes, but—" No further questions. Vanessa cut him off, her gaze sweeping the courtroom with the precision of a hawk. As Darren stepped down, whispering and speculation filled the room. Vanessa turned to me, her expression unreadable. "One more surprise," she murmured before calling her next witness. "Your Honor, we call Ms. Ellie Reed to the stand." Confusion clouded my mind as my sister stood, her expression stern. What was Vanessa doing? Ellie took the stand, her eyes meeting mine with an apologetic look. "Jake, I'm sorry," she began, her voice steady. "I didn't want to involve you until I was sure." "Sure of what?" I asked, the words out before I could stop them. Ellie turned to the court. "I've been investigating the financial discrepancies in Mr. Reed's accounts for months. Not just Lara's doing, but at the hospital where Jake works." The courtroom fell silent, processing her words. Vanessa presented documents, bank statements, transactions that led back to a fraudulent scheme at the hospital. Something I had been unwittingly part of due to manipulated financial reports. Lara's lawyer stood, objecting. "This is irrelevant to the case at hand." On the contrary, Vanessa countered smoothly. "It shows a pattern of manipulation and deceit surrounding Mr. Reed's life, pointing to a broader conspiracy involving not just Ms. Reed, but other parties interested in Mr. Reed's professional demise." The judge called for order as murmurs grew louder. The final hours of the trial were a spectacle of revelations and cross-examinations that left everyone reeling. In the end, as the jury retired to deliberate, I sat in stunned silence, processing the breadth of deceit that had entangled my life. Lara avoided my gaze, her face a mask of regret. The jury returned, and the foreman stood, clearing his throat. "In the matter of Reed versus Reed, we find in favor of the plaintiff, Mr. Jacob Reed." Relief washed over me, mixed with a profound sadness. Lara was escorted out, her glance back at me filled with a complex sorrow. Outside the courthouse, Ellie hugged me. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. I had to protect you until we knew everything. I understand, I said, though part of me was still reeling. Vanessa joined us, her briefcase in hand. Justice is messy, Jake, but it's just. You've got a chance to rebuild now, away from the shadows that have chased you. As they walked away, I turned to face the city, the setting sun casting long shadows that stretched far but no longer felt threatening. In their place was a path illuminated by truth, and for the first time in a long time, I was ready to walk it, free from the shadows of deceit.